What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Ryan Saber, and welcome into another episode of the 202 Show. First of all, before we get going, let's go ahead and welcome in my co-host, Mr. Andrew Greenblatt.
Hello.
And Mr. Matt Berenson.
Hello, hello.
Alrighty. So, on the agenda tonight, we have a pretty cool show. It's actually all DC Comics and mostly DCTV. Actually, it is all DCTV, let me correct that. And then, mind you, if we have a little bit of time, we'll talk about the Washington Redskins and Cleveland Indians changing their team name. The Redskins are officially doing it. The Cleveland Indians, Greenblatt, you said, are working on it?
They're possibly looking into it. They said they would think about it.
It'll probably happen. Let's be real. It'll probably happen. Yeah, so getting right into it, as always, if you're just joining us for the first time, we have the 202 Show. We talk superheroes, comic books, movies, music, sports, and realistically, whatever the hell else we want to talk about, because it's a podcast, and that's what podcasts are made for. So, kicking off with our biggest story, and the biggest thing I kind of want to talk about today, is Batwoman officially cast their new lead, their new quote-unquote Batwoman. The actress's name is Javicia Leslie. She has had roles on MacGyver and God Friended Me, and she's being brought in to play Ryan Wilder, a different character. She's not playing Kate Kane. They're not just recasting Kate Kane and going along with it. They're doing a completely different character who, reading the synopsis and the character description, has a lot more of a Dick Grayson feel to it. She's a little bit more edgy. She's a little bit more wild. Her name is Ryan Wilder, no pun intended. But she seems a little bit more fun. She's more creative and does things her own way, versus Kate Kane, who, as much as in the comic books, Kate Kane's her own character, in the Batwoman TV show, I know I mentioned it really felt like they were just trying to gender swap Bruce Wayne, which first of all isn't who Kate Kane is in the comic books, and isn't who the Batwoman character is in the comic book. So for all intents and purposes, the new character description of Ryan Wilder does sound a little bit more accurate to the Batwoman comic book character, in the sense that she is a little bit more fun. She is headstrong. She is stubborn, just like traditional Batman. But she is a little bit more of what I think will be an enjoyable character on a TV show, especially a CW show. I think it'll fit a little bit more. I will mention, just because it is a little bit obvious with the social culture, they are casting a black woman as the lead, which I honestly think is pretty cool that they are race swapping this character. They have done it for a bunch of other characters on the CW Arrowverse. Just off the top of my head, the entire West family, being Wally, Iris, and Joe. Who else? Wow, totally blanking. But I know there have been a bunch of other more characters where they've either gender swapped or race swapped. And like I said, I'm very interested to see how this actress does in the role. But
did you mention Mirror Master already?
Yeah, okay. Mirror Master was gender swapped, not race swapped.
Yeah,
but kind of the same thing. They're not the same thing, but very similar. Jimmy Olsen is another one. He's played by Mehcad Brooks. Was played by Mehcad Brooks in Supergirl, one of my favorite actors and one of my favorite characters in the CW shows, period.
What happened to the character?
Him as Guardian. What's that?
What happened to the character?
He left to go back to his hometown and fight corruption, where he bought a newspaper. Actually, really good send-off. I know it sounds corny, but it was a really good send-off to Mehcad Brooks leaving.
So it was just the character leaving the show, and they had to write him off.
Yeah, it wasn't they killed him. Mehcad Brooks did something wrong. It was just he wanted to leave to star in his own sitcom on another network. I don't think there's been any name of it yet, but I know Mehcad Brooks is in the process of starring in his own sitcom. Not sitcom, just any television series. Like I said, I don't know what network, but he is no longer on Supergirl. And so what I did want to kind of talk to you guys about is, how does Batwoman, the show, transition from having one main character for one season into the second season, only the second season of the show, and having a completely new main character. We've already talked about how Batwoman did come up short a little bit last year. It wasn't well critically received. It wasn't well received by fans. And there's blame to go around. As now, mind you, I am officially caught up in every CW show. That's what I've kind of been doing during quarantine and working from home. I've caught up on every single season of the CW DC universe, including all of Arrow, all of Black Lightning, Batwoman's one season, all of Supergirl, all of Legends, and of course all of The Flash. And without any shadow of a doubt, Batwoman season 1 was the worst season of the CW shows, narrowly beating Arrow season 4, but beating it enough that I can say Batwoman was worse. And like I said, there's blame to go all around. The writing was bad. The plot of the season was bad. I blame the showrunner for letting it become what it is. I blame the people up top for really pushing the fact that, well, we're gonna do a gender swap Batman, and it's gonna be Batman, but it's gonna be a woman, so it's powerful. And while I very much can appreciate the feminist agenda and the fact that they are pushing a strong female superhero who, as we've discussed before, is the first lesbian gay superhero that we've seen on TV, which isn't true, but it's the first one where they're the title character and they're the leading character.
Sarah in Legends.
Huh?
Sarah
I
in
know,
Legends.
even though Sarah Lance in Legends of Tomorrow is technically the lead character, but we'll let that be. It didn't work. And of course, there is blame to be placed on Ruby Rose, who I will say I think she did the best she could with what she had, but that still didn't make it good. And I've seen Grant Gustin make magic from really bad dialogue. I've seen Stephen Amell make great, deep, emotional scenes with really poorly written dialogue. And again, that's not to say, oh, the Batwoman writers and the Arrow writers and Flash writers are on the same page. They're not. Flash and Arrow's writers are so much better. It's not even funny. But a lot of the blame does go to Ruby Rose, unfortunately. And so when they bring in this new character, assuming they change things up, I want to ask you guys, not only because I know you aren't as deep into Batwoman as I am and as not committed to it, but as into it as I am, how can, looking at it from just a wider perspective, how can one show go from a main character leaving the show, the title character, the main character leaving the show, and go to a different character and still keep the interest from the fans that they don't get canceled in the next year? Matt, start us off.
So the biggest issue, and I think the biggest obstacle they're going to have to jump, is obviously Ruby Rose wants nothing to do with this show. And they didn't end on very good terms. Basically, you know, the nice way they put it is we both decided that we weren't they didn't want to go in the same direction. Say that as you will, but usually that means that Ruby Rose didn't want to be there or they didn't want her there.
It did sound, sorry to interrupt you, but from everything I've read, it did sound more like Ruby Rose just didn't want to be there. She wanted to focus on movies. She is a movie actress. When you commit to be a series lead for a show that does 23 episode season, that is a really, really, really big commitment. You have to put other projects on hold for this commitment. This is why we're just really starting to see Stephen Amell do movies now. Except for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that I know Greenblatt wants to bring up.
I haven't seen it.
Huh?
I haven't seen any of the new live action ones.
They're not bad.
I only watch the cartoons.
Okay. Point is, when you're leading a project like this, you do have to put other things on hold. So yes, it was, I think, Ruby Rose didn't want to make that commitment.
She also said, she didn't. Some of the also reports came in she didn't want to do the late night shoots. She didn't want to be on set for that long.
Yeah,
it's taxing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, if there's any bit of I don't want to use the word respect, but at least just like grace there. Ruby Rose does the first 2 or 3 episodes in the next season, maybe takes on a, like a sidekick type thing, especially if she's starting to sound like a Robin-ish type, or maybe she dies and they kill her off.
That's I think what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so I think the best way to do it is if she takes the bullet and she shows up. At least we see her die. We see her go out in some way, not just between seasons all of a sudden she's dead and gone.
I mean,
I
they could go Mighty Morphin Power Rangers route with it. Just have
no, you're laughing, but I honestly think that's what they're doing. I don't.
Were you thinking the same thing?
I don't think she's coming back at all.
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I think
and that's
she's
the
done.
issue.
I actually I'm 99.9% sure she's not coming back at all.
No.
So if nothing else, what I expect to see from Kate Kane is the stunt double in the suit.
Yep.
And the stunt double, the first couple scenes of Batwoman season 2 is the stunt double dressed as Kate Kane going out and fighting what we know for a fact right now to either be Scarecrow himself or Scarecrow's army. And something happens to Kate and she disappears and we never see her again. Yeah. We are not going to see Ruby Rose in a single scene from Batwoman season 2. If we do, it's going to be leftover footage from Batwoman season 1. And like I said, I do, as Greenblatt brought up, expect them to go the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers route where you see the back of their heads and you kind of clearly know it's a stunt double and you hear the voice from the back of their heads and it's like, okay, that's not like exactly it. Like, you know what I mean? So I do agree with you, and I wish it could have been they brought her back and kind of did the passing of the torch or the fake passing of the torch like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers did do, where you saw the back of not Jason, not Zach, and not Trini's heads. But yeah, so Greenblatt,
we're off to go save the embassy or something. Whatever the hell.
World Peace Conference.
Right.
Yeah. They left to go to the World Peace Conference. So
with the show, I don't think it's gonna last. I think like one of the reasons why Batwoman was as successful as it was because it had such a big name attached to it. Like Ruby Rose probably brought in she is a big
I know she yes and no, because I think you have two sides of the coin. First of all, you do have Ruby Rose is a star and what did have an established career before she came to Batwoman. Yeah. She was in Orange as the New Black. If
John Wick.
2 of the John Wick movies, right?
I think she was only in 2.
Okay.
I think she was only in the second one.
So she had an established career as a movie star and as a respected actress before. Granted, so did Grant Gustin. He was in Glee and some other small projects. I believe it or not, actually think going into these shows, Melissa Benoist was the biggest star.
She was in Homeland, I believe.
Yeah, she was in Glee. She was in a lot of things before becoming Supergirl. Stephen Amell, a little bit of a smaller star, and obviously Being Arrow kicked him off. Cress Williams, too, can't forget about him, was in a bunch of projects before becoming Black Lightning. But I also think the other thing is you have Batwoman. And the fact that we're in our established DC universe with Arrow, with the Flash, with the Black Canary, with the White Canary, with Martian Manhunter, with Supergirl, with Superman by the time Batwoman was getting going, and Lois Lane and Lex Luthor and all these established characters, we are finally getting a real character in a real show, even if it is Batwoman and not Batman or not Nightwing or Red Hood or Red Robin. It's still a Bat family character, and we're finally getting one. So that's, I think, what drove me as a comic book fan to the show more than Ruby Rose. And yes, you're right. I don't want to say the teen girls who are watching who know the name Ruby Rose, who that definitely did bring a little bit of recognition to the show.
It was also a big like LGBT thing.
It was.
That brought in a lot of attention.
And also the other thing is actress they did get,
She is bisexual, yes.
She is bisexual. Javicia Leslie. I want to make sure I pronounce that right. She is bisexual. So not that realistically it would matter in any other role we were discussing ever, but because it is Batwoman, because people are obviously proud of the fact that this is the first title character who is a gay woman, I can understand how it's important that the actress is true to the sexuality. Just like in Supergirl, you have, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name, Nicole Maines, who plays Dreamer being the first trans superhero to make the small screen, and Nicole Maines obviously being a trans actress. So I can very much understand why you want the two to coincide. And yes, Javicia Leslie is a bisexual woman, so it does fit. Getting more back into the how can they make this successful though. The main thing to me that I think has to carry the show going forward, or at least carry it in the first couple episodes, is establishing the fact that this isn't the same character. They, in the character description, have described the fact that it isn't the same character, and this is totally personality, but they need to, in my eyes, separate from the Kate Kane character that is Batwoman. They need to separate from how serious it was. They need to separate from how dramatic it was. That was one of my main things watching Batwoman. And I know we've discussed this plenty of times over and really discussed it from a sexuality aspect and from a love angle aspect, and the fact that this, more than anything else, felt like a forced soap opera. Even worse than The Flash, which is really, really soap opera-y lately. Right about from season 4 on, it's basically been described as a superhero soap opera. And even parts of Arrow were too. But believe me, Batwoman was above and beyond. It was too serious for me. And for a CW show, it was way too serious. And I feel like bringing in this actress who's more of a Dick Grayson type character will change that. And do you guys feel like if they lighten the tone of the show, it'll be a little bit more well received?
So the issue is that you're already on a sinking ship.
Yes.
This isn't a show that's been well received, as we've said earlier. This isn't a show that has a lot of hype around it. So what they really need to do is exactly what you said. Just rebrand, become a different show, get a different feel, hire better writers, and try not to be so serious. Don't take yourself so serious.
The show itself feels very emo. And
yeah.
And it's a very teenage emo versus so I as I said earlier in the show, I have spent more or less my Corona time catching up on all the CW shows, and I've definitely noticed I don't want to say the feel. What's the word I'm looking for?
The vibe.
Mood in each show is different. Barry is happy and love Barry being the Flash, not Barry with Bill Hader that Greenblatt told me to watch.
You absolutely should. It's absolutely amazing.
The Flash has this lovey, campy, every episode usually ends on a kind of high note, even if there's a cliffhanger. Everybody's happy. Everybody loves each other. Everybody has these emotional moments of, oh, you mean so much to me, and I could never do this without you raising me as a son. And it's such a lovey experience. And
very
Legends
fluffy.
is a little bit more of the
Wackiness.
Legends is almost more of the frat house type experience where everybody's having a good time and everybody's making fun of each other and everybody's kind of dicks to each other and they're drinking beer and making jokes. Black Lightning is the most serious, including Arrow. Arrow's serious, but Black Lightning is really serious. Like every single episode, there are dire consequences. People are being experimented on. People are being held as slaves in cages. Black Lightning season 3 gets really, really dark. Obviously, there's a big race factor to it, and of course, Supergirl is even further than Barry as being happy and everybody's smiling and there are dire consequences, but everybody loves each other. So I know I'm ranting, but the point I'm trying to make is that realistically, from my perspective, the way to change this going forward and the way they really do need to do a hard reboot. And I can't think of any better way to do a hard reboot than recasting the main character and bringing in an entirely different character to be the main character versus a new name. Now, I know I did mention this week how I wanted to talk about some examples of how this did go well. And the problem is because what I watch on TV is so kind of specific, I found myself looking stuff up and seeing, they did this on Scrubs, and I didn't really watch Scrubs. They did this on The West Wing. I didn't really watch The West Wing. They did
How
this on
have
The
you
Wire.
not watched The West Wing?
Shut up, Greenblatt. They did this on The Wire, and I'm like, okay, I've seen half The Wire. So some of the ones I did obviously notice in either replacing a character or replacing an actor and bringing in a new actor to play that character, or getting rid of one character and bringing in another actor to play a different character. And even looking through my notes, even the two completely obvious ones for this show and the three of us, and I know for a fact the first two that Greenblatt brought up is Terrence Howard is Rhodey in the MCU, War Machine going from Terrence Howard to Don Cheadle, and Bruce Banner, the Hulk in the MCU going from Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo. And even if you look at those two examples, well, yes, it's the same character, they kind of take on a different personality.
Yeah.
The Edward Norton Bruce Banner, I kind of look at him and think, oh, schizophrenia. Whereas I look at the Mark Ruffalo Bruce Banner and kind of have a more social anxiety feel to it. You know what I mean? Like, the Edward Norton Bruce Banner was a little bit of a crazy man. And Mark Ruffalo, you think, like, okay, he's just kind of awkward. Terrence Howard was kind of arrogant and a little egotistical and thought his shit doesn't stink and thought he had the biggest dick in the room. And Don Cheadle was more like, okay, I know I have the biggest dick in the room.
As well.
Huh?
He was also like a team player as well.
Yeah, Don Cheadle's a little bit more of a team player, a little bit more of a soldier.
Which is
some of the
what
other
the
ones
character
I
is in the
did note,
comics.
and these are a little bit more sitcom-y, aside from... So we have Ron Perlman getting killed off in Sons of Anarchy and Charlie Hunnam becoming the main character, even though Charlie Hunnam was kind of the main character to begin with, and then they brought in Jimmy Smits, who was cool. There were so many on The Walking Dead and so many in Game of Thrones that I can't even bother.
Let's not talk about Game of Thrones, please.
Yeah, I know. Greenblatt's still butthurt. Some of the other ones, Greenblatt was actually the one who brought up Paul Snyder leaving in season 2 of Parks and Recreation. They replaced him with Adam Scott and Rob Lowe. One that wasn't very well received, even though I think worked for maybe 2 or 3 episodes, but then everybody's like, we need Steve Carell back, is Steve Carell leaving The Office and replacing him with James Spader, who I thought was kind of remotely interesting for the first couple episodes of season 8. And then I'm like, okay, this went to shit. We need Steve Carell back.
He holds up as my favorite character on that show. I won't take that back.
I know. And that's the thing. I love Robert California too, but it's like, okay, he's not Michael. He doesn't have the lovability of Michael.
Wait, Matt, your favorite character Steve Carell or James Spader?
James Spader.
Okay. I just wanted to
Steve Carell is Michael Greenie. Another, I know the one we weren't going to set up, but I thought of this chain, and I have to share the chain. So 2.5 Men, from Charlie Sheen to Ashton Kutcher, that 70s show, Topher Grace and Ashton Kutcher, Danny Masterson, Wilmer Valderrama, and then
we really shouldn't be talking about Danny Masterson. We really shouldn't.
I'm not talking about any of the things he did.
Just about him being on a show.
A terrible human being, but as an actor, he was the main character on that 70s show after Topher Grace and Ashton Kutcher left, and he was a main character on The Ranch. And when he was more or less indicted in the court of public opinion and indicted legally for his sexual assault allegations, he was kicked off and replaced by Dax Shepard.
Huge
And
fan of Dak
realis-
Shepard, by the way.
Huh?
Huge
Great
fan of Dak Shepard, by the way.
Everybody's a huge fan of Dak Shepard.
Love that man.
I really wanted to try to watch Chips, but I keep hearing awful things about that movie.
Yeah, me too. But
Like,
the thing is,
Dak
and
Shepard
relating
and
it,
Michael Pena, and like I really wanted to watch it, but I'm
and
like,
but relating it back to Batwoman and trying to make it back to the point that I feel like we've been drilling in for the last 20 minutes, is every time, if you look at every single one of those, it goes from the characters have one personality to another personality. Steve Carell's Michael Scott is the goofy, partially lovable, but partially kind of an asshole boss who is self-centered, but also a dork, and you love him because of it. Whereas as much as Robert California is very funny to watch, and I love watching his character, I can't really love him as a character because he is a self-centered, egotistical douche. And the same thing. You go from Topher Grace, Sarah Foreman, and Ashton Kutcher's Michael Kelso to Hyde and Fez leading the way in that 70s show. A CW example is realistically season 1 of Legends of Tomorrow. People forget Rip Hunter was the head of the team. Rip Hunter led the team, and then Rip, quote unquote, died in the beginning of season 2, and that's when Katie Lotz, Sarah Lance took over as the head of the team and really never looked back. So the point I'm trying to make.
wondered what happened to him, that
Huh?
character. I was like, because I didn't watch. I fell off of Legend. I was always wondering what happened to him.
He went on his own. He left to go on his own after Vandal Savage was killed, because that was his mission.
How did
Event.
they kill Vandal? I thought he was like unkillable.
It's Legends, man. Let it be.
Alright.
It's TV.
Because I
let it go.
I only mainly know the guy that played him from
Okay.
Doctor Who.
So, Rip, the Legends killed Vandal. Rip basically said, well, my job's done. I'm out. He disappears. We're supposed to never see him again. And then we see Rip Hunter from X years later. He's like, yeah, I'm from 8 years in the future. I created the FBI of time, and I'm in charge. And we're all just like, okay, but Sarah's still in charge of the team, right? And that's more or less it. So I do want to move forward because we've been talking about Batwoman for, at this point, 20 minutes, almost a half an hour. And the other big news to kind of break this past week was that HBO Max and Warner Brothers is already developing a spin-off show, basically Gotham 2.0, but instead of on Fox, it's being set in the universe of Robert Pattinson's Batman. And just, I want to
Gotham reboot time.
They're literally rebooting Gotham after it ended like less than, I think, 3 years ago.
It was like 2 years. Yeah, like
2
years,
years
a year
ago.
ago.
Before I give my thoughts, I just want your guys' reaction. Matt, what do you think?
Okay, so I've had this complaint about DC and Warner Brothers for the longest time, and that's the fact that they're trying way too hard to play catch up.
And
That's
fast.
all they're
going
ever
way too
trying
fast.
to do. They just move way too quickly, and they don't half-ass things, but they don't take the time to develop anything. So if I'm DC, if I'm Warner Brothers, if I'm HBO Max, and I think I want to expand on this universe in which Robert Pattinson's Batman is going to exist, my first thought is, let's see how Disney Plus does with these Marvel shows, because this is the first time we're seeing shows be genuinely linked in with the cinematic universe.
Aside from The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I was gonna say The Mandalorian did a fantastic job.
But comic books, so I understand. Keep going.
But while The Mandalorian, yes, is in that universe, anything that happened so far in The Mandalorian has zero effect to anything that's happened in the movies.
Exactly.
And probably won't ever have anything to do with the movies, besides the fact that it is in the same universe. The movies might affect the show, but not vice versa. Whereas a show like this, you can only assume that if it's taking place in the Robert Pattinson Batman world, it's got to have some sort of effect. And we don't know this for sure yet, but what's the deal with where is Batman? So I think it's too much, too quick. Let's see if people even like the movie first.
Yeah.
And let's see how a different audience responds to a different cinematic universe bringing in TV shows to move forward in their storytelling.
And the thing is, I agree. It's just it's too fast.
Yeah.
They're trying to do too much too quick, and I think that you can't. The way you establish a movie franchise isn't go from a movie and then link in a TV show and then use the TV show segue to another movie. You just make a sequel. And if people like that sequel, make another sequel. If you remember, and obviously you guys remember, because first of all, we're basically MCU historians here, and it was only 2008, so it was only X amount of years ago. The first MCU movie was Iron Man. Then they made the Hulk, and they never officially in marketing said it's the same, it's in the same universe until you get to the post-credit scene and Robert Downey Jr. pops up. And they said in the post-credit scene of Iron Man, they had Nick Fury come in, or Samuel L. Jackson come in as Nick Fury and say, I'm working on the Avengers Initiative. But they didn't rush and go from Iron Man, Hulk, Avengers. They went Iron Man, Hulk, Iron Man 2,
Thor.
Then you do Thor's own movie.
Captain
then you do
America.
Cap's own movie. Then you do the Avengers.
4 years later.
Yes. Whereas in the DC EU that Warner Brothers has already established once, and I don't want to say failed yet because they're still in the process of it. Wonder Woman was good.
Wonder Woman was great.
They can work off Wonder Woman, and yes, we are all looking forward to seeing Wonder Woman 84. We've talked about how, yeah, I know Matt's kind of on the fence. I'm
just excited to see. I'm just excited to see
Pedro
Pedro Pascal.
Yeah. So where the problem is, and part of me is thinking, like, because the ones that have already flopped and DCU's already had so many flops, they're already dead in the water, and they're not, because Wonder Woman 84, if that comes out and that's really good, that can still pick it up. They still have the Flash movie planned. If that comes out and it's really good with Ezra Miller potentially and Michael Keaton, that's gonna get a lot of traction, and you can build it up. The problem
you're also
is
getting a couple other big movies.
Yes, they are. That's the
Black
thing.
Black Adam, Shazam 2.
Exactly. They have these set up. But the problem is, because they failed at the beginning and rushed so far to get to in their, what was it? I literally think third movie, because Wonder Woman came after Justice League, right? It was Wonder Woman first.
No, Wonder Woman was 2017. Batman v Superman was 2016. So
and Man of Steel was 13.
Yes, and yeah.
So they got to the ensemble movie in movie 4, whereas Marvel took, off the top of my head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Marvel got to it in movie 6. And realistically, when you build a TV show, we know Robert Pattinson's not going to be the star of this TV show. No. So you have to establish main characters in the TV show. I bet you anything in the world, if it's set in Gotham and has to do with the police officer, the main character is going to be Jim Gordon. Then we're going to see Harvey Bullock. Then we're going to see Renee Montoya. We're probably going to see, huh?
I want to chime in. With the, okay. All right.
We're going to see, they're not going to go right into establishing the Joker on TV, because you want to establish the Joker in the movie. So we're going to see, like, Carmine Falcone. We're going to see Salvatore Maroni.
Black
We're
Mask.
going to hear all the other Italian last names.
Sionis.
Huh?
Sionis.
Yeah, we're going to probably see the Sionis name pop up, and we're going to see the lower level villains, because remember, they're establishing Paul Dano as the Riddler. They're establishing Colin Farrell as the Penguin.
Great casting, too.
Great casting. And HBO Max, unless their budget is way bigger than I think it is,
they've got a huge budget.
But they're not going to be able to bring these names in for weekly episodes.
No, not for that. But I think I think cinematography wise, they're going to be good. They're going to be able to get some big name actors for this movie. I have a good feeling for the show. Sorry, show. But I'm curious. I'm into it. I mean, I'm what's the word for it?
Intrigued by it.
Intrigued, and also for what's the word where you're not really bothered by things as much anymore.
Indifferent.
Yeah, I guess indifferent. Like I'm
No, it's just
like no, like you're used to something already going on, and you're just like, F it, why not?
that
It's
pretty
just,
much describes it. It's
yeah.
it's the fact that I'm sitting here doodling and thinking like, okay, if I'm resetting this, say we're completely wiping out the DCEU, everything, because Aquaman sucked, Justice League sucked, Batman vs Superman was good up until probably 2/3 of the way in, and then you're like, okay, this is completely going off the rails. In fact, looking back, I can't even say Batman v Superman was good.
I
I mean, the
fell
Batman,
asleep.
like, I mean, the warehouse fight scene is still like the best Batman scene.
And that's it. And like
Yeah.
that's it. Man of Steel, I thought was a good movie. Didn't fit Superman really well. Wonder Woman was awesome. That's the outlier. And Shazam was okay.
I
Matt
liked
didn't
Shazam.
like it. Greenblatt thought it was all right. I thought
I
it was moderate.
hated
I mean,
Shazam.
I liked it. I mean, I also really like Zachary Levi, and I also got really, really excited in Shazam when the Shazam family showed up, like with Mary
We all
Marvel.
did.
I'm like,
It's so I'm sitting here jotting things down and thinking, if I'm doing a DCEU, I'm doing and starting with Robert Pattinson Batman. I'm doing Batman 1, Batman 2, Superman 1. We can probably keep. Here's the thing: the only thing I would keep is Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Probably Henry Cavill as Superman, but that's a different story.
and Ray Fisher wasn't bad as Cyborg.
Yeah,
Not Jason Momoa?
Jason Momoa was a great Aquaman.
Yeah, I wouldn't take him away.
I wouldn't take him. I mean, he's brought such a really good taste to the character.
so are
Just
we
a bad
saying?
movie.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible.
So are
I
we
enjoyed it.
Would you hypothetically keep the DCEU?
Yeah,
and
we're keeping the DCU staying as it is. I mean, because Robert Pattinson's its own thing. It's not interacting
it's
with
its own
any
thing,
other.
but then you have two separate universes running.
Why not?
Because you have so many at this point. DC has so many projects going on. They have so many universes. It's like and the funny thing is the idea.
It is what
The
it
really,
is.
huh?
It
but
is what it is. They're not gonna.
That's sloppy. And it's
That's
just
the
like
point.
there's like nothing exciting about it. Yeah, we're seeing like these really cool characters on a big screen, but where's the buildup? Who's part of who? It's like you look at like the Sony Fox Marvel split.
Yes.
Like that was justified by the fact that the properties were owned by different studios, and yeah, it definitely confused people, definitely confused our parents, but for the most part, like it worked because these are under different titles. But then you have Warner Brothers and DC, and you don't know what belongs to what anymore. And you need a 12-page explanation about it. And then 3 years later, you need some director to be like, oh, no, this was actually supposed to be the movie.
And the thing is, first of all, I'm thinking just off the top of my head how to me it's almost hypocritical. Not hypocritical, but ironic, because in 1985, so mind you, the CW, they do a big crossover every year. If you're completely blind to the CW shows, which is really ironic why you'd be watching our show, because we talk about it every week. But obviously the big CW crossover this past year was Crisis on Infinite Earths. And in 1985, when they did the Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline, their main idea was everything's too sloppy. We have too many Elseworlds Earths going on. There's too much stuff going on. Let's do one event where we take everything and consolidate it into one. And that's where they had Crisis on Infinite Earths, where unfortunately they killed off Supergirl, they killed off the Flash, and they said, this is our universe. This is what we have. This is what we're sticking with. And they did that on the CW, and they teased it in the beginning, talking about how these were all the multiverses. We saw Batman 89. We saw Earth 89 with we talked about this last week, I swear to God. But we saw Earth 89 with the reporter from Batman. We saw the Earth 9 with Titans. We saw the Earth with Doom Patrol. We saw Earth with Stargirl teased. We saw it, and now there's just so many going on, and they're still there. The entire point of Crisis was to condense everything to one. And all they really did was condense the CW shows into one. Where now Supergirl, Flash, Legends, Black Lightning, and
the
who am I
DC.
missing?
Don't
Batwoman,
forget, and the
Supergirl,
DCEU.
Superman, huh?
And the DCEU, because Ezra Miller showed up.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's not in the same universe. They're not on the same Earth anymore. In the MCU, Cap, Iron Man, everybody in the MCU is on the same Earth. And because the X-Men universes are, for all intents and purposes, over, and the Sony Spider-Verses are, for all intents and purposes, I can't say over because Venom, and that's weird. I don't know how
They're
that's
figuring
working.
it
It's
out.
kind of there, it kind of isn't. And Marvel has a Netflix universe, which is over. But now what Marvel's doing is they're condensing everything into being on the same page. All of the Netflix shows got canceled because they weren't on the same page. They wanted to go to Disney Plus, and they could make TV shows where they're in the same realm. DC just isn't doing that. And to me, it is, as Matt said, it's very confusing and it's very sloppy. Because you have the DC universe. I blatantly don't understand why there are 3 shows going on the DC universe being made by the same company. 4, if you count Swamp Thing, being made by the same company on the same label, and they're in different universes. I don't understand why you can't interconnect them. You even had the Doom Patrol make a cameo appearance on an episode of Titans with the same Brendan Fraser actor, Robot Man, and then did Doom Patrol with the same characters, but instead of whoever played the Chief in the Titans episode,
I was just thinking about this the other day. I'm like, who the hell? I was literally thinking about this yesterday. I'm like, who the hell played the Chief in the Titans episode? I don't remember.
It's literally like, what the hell? It's so hard to keep track. And now you're doing 2 separate movie universes with the same character.
And I think in all possibility, this Batman movie, like the Matt Reeves one, I think it might be just a one-shot. Like they're just doing.
Way.
I hope it's not.
You know,
At least
they
a trilogy.
cast Paul Dano as the Riddler, and
Did
Colin
they say
Farrell
it
as
was
Penguin.
Did he say that
Totally
they were planning on doing a trilogy?
No, but
I think they
no way.
were.
Yeah, and there's
I
no way you're gonna
remember
do a TV show for a one-off movie.
Yeah, because you're trying to establish a universe.
Yeah.
They're creating a universe, and that's another issue though. Is you have a DCEU where Batfleck still exists, and God knows what they're doing with that. You have now Robert Pattinson Batman, and then you have a CW Batman, all live action.
They
On
are a
top-
trilogy.
And
Don't
don't forget,
trilogy.
and
It's gonna
don't
be a trilogy,
forget,
there you go.
don't forget about Michael Keaton back in the mix too.
Exactly. So now that's 4 live action Batmans that currently exist in DC.
And Warren
It's a
Christie.
little ridiculous.
And Warren Christie, because they just brought him on the CW too.
Right. Into the
Yep,
Batverse.
and Warren Christie. That's 5 Batmans. That doesn't happen. That's
That
ridiculous.
is absurd. I forgot
and
about
No one's on the
everybody's gonna
same page.
And what everybody's going to want to say, if people are watching this, they're going to want to say, well, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. But the way they did that was Tobey Maguire went, and then Tobey Maguire ended. Andrew Garfield went, Andrew Garfield ended. Tom Holland went, and when, not that any of us like to think about it, but Tom Holland's already done X amount of movies. I know they're working on another contract with them. They have him booked for one more movie. It was supposed to be, he was done after the last one. They have him for one more. I have to imagine they're going to keep him. Tom Holland's going to make a
we've got at
buttload
least
of money.
We've got at least 2 more because he's doing another team up.
Yeah, another
Yeah,
Avengers movie.
And his own solo movie. So we've
Yeah,
got
that's what I'm saying.
at least 2 more.
Tom Holland's going to make a buttload of money. I have to imagine they're going to keep him. But the point is, one day when Tom Holland's done with the role, you'll see somebody else pick up Peter Parker.
Probably Miles Morales.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see Peter Parker again for a while.
I think
we
we're
get a live
going to
action.
get
no,
a
you're
Miles.
right. You're
We're going to get a Miles.
definitely right. We're going to get Miles before we get.
I mean,
100% agree
did
with
you guys see that that TikTok that was going viral of like that Georgia? Like
I'm
that
not
Georgia
even going to
Tech-
answer that question.
No, it's this like it got attention from the head of Disney.
Oh, that
Like,
kid.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
guy
but he
that
was
did-
more of he's not looking for an acting gig. He
I
wants
know.
to do
but it's pretty cool. I mean, we're definitely getting Miles. I hope.
Oh,
we
definitely.
already
Miles is game
teased.
tracking.
They've already teased Miles as well.
No,
Yeah.
they
I mean,
did.
they had-
Donald Glover.
Yeah, he played
'Cause-
Aaron Davis. He played the Prowler.
Yeah.
But then again, that's another second universe we're getting because Into the Spider-Verse is going to be continuing as well.
But there's a
Different,
point to that.
animated.
They're doing Into the Spider-Verse as a specific multiverse movie. I feel like DC's multiverse is messy just to be messy, just because it's not well put together. And even I was watching the latest episode of Stargirl today, and they were talking about the 7 Soldiers of Victory, which was a really random team that from way back in like the 40s in DC Comics, and they mentioned it, and they're listing off the names of everybody in it. She's like, what? He's like, oh, that's the Crimson Avenger, and that's Robin Hood, and that's whoever, so and so, and that's the Stranger, and whoever. And I'm looking up, I'm like, wow, I've never seen this before. And I literally read and then looked at Taylor and said, that's not supposed to be Robin Hood. That's the Green Arrow, but because of the CW, they can't say the name Green Arrow.
I remember back in high school when like the show, like when Arrow was kicking off, I had a friend he was like, oh, this is Robin Hood. He's not Green Arrow. And I'm like, I was so dumbfounded because he was like, yeah, it's Robin Hood. It's Robin Hood. And I'm like,
no.
It's like he thought the character was literally Robin Hood.
No, and I get that. But what I'm saying here is the character in the comic books in the 7 Soldiers is supposed to be the Green Arrow. Yeah. But because licensing and they didn't want to mix up universes, they just called him Robin Hood instead of the Green Arrow. It's annoying. And the last thing I do want to, so as we have kind of covered that and talked about how it's going too fast, the last thing I do want to talk about, and it does lead into this, is actually Stargirl. The fact that Stargirl has been renewed to go to a season 2, but it's only going to be on the CW and not the DC universe. First of all, I don't understand at all. Greenblatt and I have had this conversation. I actually think we might have talked about it on last week's episode.
No, we didn't. We didn't get to it.
I don't know what the hell is going on with the DC Universe subscription service. Just off the fact that when I remember when they first talked about DC Universe doing their own subscription service, DC Comics is doing their own subscription service, what they were trying to sell to you was all DC Comics content in one place. Well, now I have to sign up for Netflix to watch all the CW shows. I have to sign up for HBO Max to watch Watchmen, and now this new Green Lantern show. Eventually, it's going to be exclusive to HBO Max. And now Harley Quinn, which was only exclusive to DC Universe, is now going on HBO Max. And Batwoman, for some reason, is on HBO Max, but not the Netflix shows. It's the entire DC Comics landscape right now is just so messy. Honest to God, it's so spread out. And the thing is, I don't want to give another example of how Marvel is killing it and DC is flopping, but Marvel said, we're going to put all of our content in one place, and then gave us Disney Plus, and now it's all in one place. And right now, they're working on getting the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films in there, and they're already starting to get the X-Men films in there. Yeah. If you went in there in the last few days, you've seen X-Men Days of Future Past is available on Disney Plus. And I have to imagine that if Days of Future Past is there, the rest of them are going to follow.
Well, First Class is on HBO Max currently.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not even going to get into that. But you know what I mean? So Stargirl is going over from... Now, Stargirl has been airing on both networks, the DC Universe and the CW. I have been watching it on the DC Universe just because it's on demand and there are no ads. So from that perspective, I am a little bit pissed it's going from there to the CW, where I either have to watch it with ads or have to watch it scheduled on live TV. And also the major aspect that I know Greenblatt and I have been talking about off air that we have to look at is that the production value is going to go down. Now, granted, I would not say that the production value right now is that great to begin with. It's not
like Titans or like Doom Patrol good.
Yeah, Titans and Doom Patrol are up there, and it looks more realistic. The CW's And granted, the CW has never looked like despicable, horrendous bad.
I mean, there's an episode of Supergirl where it's arguably like the worst like CGI that's ever existed.
See, I would argue there are episodes of Flash with the elongated man.
No, I have to show you the clip. I've shown it to Matt. Matt, you've seen it, right? The one with like the star wipe effect, where like she literally turns from the construction worker into herself, and it's like the worst looking thing on the planet.
But that's the point. The point we're trying to make is that the production value is going to go down. Obviously, if you're not caught up to Stargirl, it's pretty good. It took me a few minutes to get into it.
I'm still far behind. I haven't watched episode 3 yet.
It's good and it's dark. Like it's deep. It's not like Supergirl.
I know they killed a kid.
They did.
Yeah.
In like the 3rd episode, it's not like Supergirl where, like I said, everything kind of ends on a high note and everybody's kind of friends at the end of the day. This is really dramatic. This is really deep. So I'm not looking forward to seeing the production value go down. And even worse, as much as I pump and plug the CW shows as much as I can because I love them so much, they're not perfect by absolutely any sense. And most people who are the quote-unquote average fans have really fallen off entirely. We are really the super fans, and I know you guys aren't as up-to-date as I am, but in terms of being caught up with every show. But there are people who have just, as soon as Arrow started to get weird and The Flash got past season 2, people fell off. And in a way, I can understand that because they really are turning into more fan-servicing shows versus creating great content that people want to watch. And it worries me with Stargirl in the sense that it's going to get a lot campier and be more of a fan-servicey show than being a good superhero-based show. Does that make sense? Being a good show that happens to star a superhero. Because if we look back, that's really what made Arrow so good. And that's what made in particular, I felt like that's what made the Netflix shows so good, that they were great shows that just happened to star superheroes.
And they also had like Netflix money, and they didn't have any like ratings limitations or had to appeal to advertisers. They could just do whatever the hell they wanted. Like, they could show blood, guts, like, they could do whatever.
Yes and no. I think...
we wouldn't have been able to get as brutal of a Punisher show, I don't think.
Oh, absolutely not. Punisher show wouldn't have fit anywhere else but HBO Max or Netflix. Punisher show won't fit on Disney+.
I mean, it would go... If anything, it would go on Hulu, because that's Disney-owned.
Hulu would probably be better off, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So
because that's where The Runaways is on. That's where that's where Disney. Yeah.
Exactly. It's It's
And The Runaways got kind of bad.
Yeah.
I couldn't. Yeah.
And the thing is, it is hard for any of these shows to last, especially. I mean, the only time I can even think where a superhero show successfully went from one network to the other was Supergirl, and that's because it was horrendously bad on CBS. It was bad on CBS. Not as bad as Batwoman or Arrow season 4, but if I'm ranking seasons, Supergirl season 1 is probably right down at the bottom with Batwoman 1 and Arrow season 4. And then they went from CBS to CW, which is really CBS, the parent company of CW. But like I said, the last thing, if you guys do want to talk about it real quick, is Washington Redskins changing their team name.
Sure.
Yeah,
you don't really have they haven't officially announced the new team name yet, because I saw some tweets earlier. Some sources insiders were saying reason why they didn't announce the name today is because the name they want is in the middle of a trademark dispute.
Yes.
So they can't. Yeah.
Which Matt, as Greenblatt and I mentioned before you got in here, that means it has to be. To me, if they're in a trademark dispute, that means there's another either college or professional sports team that goes by that name. I have to assume it's going to be the Warriors.
I still think even the Warriors could be possibly problematic if you think about it.
The thing is, though, I
Like,
actually
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
go ahead.
watched something. I watched something recently, and it was a Native American man, and he was talking about this whole thing with the Redskins. And obviously, the three of us have zero opinion on
Nope.
this that genuinely matters.
yeah.
So, what the Native American man said was that he honestly felt that, yeah, while Redskin is a term that's a little derogatory, it makes him happy that Native Americans are still in mainstream culture. How even though America has wiped them out left, right, and sideways, that they still are able to make some sort of appearance. What he said would either make it better was one of two things. A, start donating to actual reservations. You
Which I
know,
don't think Dan Snyder ever would.
he won't. But if you
Yeah,
wanted to
because
keep
Dan
the
Snyder.
Redskins name so much, then keep it, but maybe just look out for Native American culture a little bit more. Two, if you want to change the name and you still, if the whole idea of a Native American representing your team is so important to you, pick a specific tribe and bring light upon that too. And again, this is coming from a Native American man who is giving his opinion.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. I think that if they really wanted to keep their name and if they were to just they release an initiative that's a little more, like generous towards Native Americans, where they say X amount of money a year will go towards them, would be a really good look right now.
I don't think it. You're also forgetting a big important thing, is the advertisers and the merch seals.
Sure.
I think that's honestly the real reason why they're changing the name, because
That's definitely the real reason.
yeah, the owner of the stadium is like saying, yeah, we're not gonna really let you play here if you don't change your name. Nike's pulled out.
Yeah, it's FedEx and Nike.
Yeah,
FedEx and Nike are the two who are.
Target also pulled all
It's good
Redskins
on
gear
them.
from there. Yeah, no, 100%. Tostitos is done. Pepsi's done.
It's and that's what I'm saying. Their major sponsor. That's not that public opinion isn't kind of swaying it, which I'm sure it is, because we've heard talks about this forever. I don't think it was really going to happen until the sponsor says, no, we're out if you don't fix this.
Because that's the only thing that speaks to Dan Snyder, his money.
Yes, and
Exactly.
FedEx, who owns who has the naming rights to the stadium, says we're out if you don't fix this. And Nike, who makes the freaking uniforms, says we're not making. Of course, I saw that. Says we're not making Redskins gear anymore. And so, of course, that's what's going to cause this.
Because Dan Snyder was like a tweet popped up recently from a quote from Dan Snyder from 2013 is like, I'm never changing the name of the Redskins. And he's like, you can quote me on that, and never in all caps.
Love it.
It's my only, is there another way? You said doing naming it after a specific tribe. Is there a way they can honor Native Americans politically correctly? Calling it the Washington Natives, Washington, and the other team, huh?
I don't think it's a win scenario.
I know it doesn't.
They have to go. They have to go with something
tongue.
else. No, like one of the most popular choices right now is the Red Tails, like based off the plane, which I'm all for, because that way you can keep the color scheme. The design's really nice,
and it's also a political thing. The Red Tails, for those of you watching who don't know, were a group of African American fighter pilots in World War II who were essentially sent on suicide missions by plane, and that's what they are. So it'd be honoring not only African American people, but African American fighter pilots in World War II. That is going to wrap up our show tonight. Thank you guys for watching. As always, make sure you subscribe down below. And good news, this is going to be the first episode that we have posted on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Music. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, because we are going to figure out how to do that. because if Mike can do it, I can do it too. So,
Oh, it's easy.
yeah, right? Make
got
sure you
you.
subscribe if you're watching this video on YouTube. And if you're listening to the audio, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen. As always, I'm Ryan Saber. Boys, thank you so much. Next week, I frankly have no idea what's going to happen because we don't know what's going to happen in the news. But I can't wait to see you there. So I love you guys. I appreciate you. And so long and good night.